Hi everybody, I'm Alan from UDoAV. Today we're going to do a different type of patch. We call this a California patch or a blowout patch. And what we're going to do is we're going to patch this hole right here, and I don't have the plug for it. So this also works really nice if you're doing, like, say, a lathe and plaster wall where you can't attach any backing to the back and you kind of just want to attach to the front. Really quick and easy. Anybody can do this. Okay, so first thing you want to do is you want to make this hole into a shape that we can use. So I want to make it square. Looks to me like if I were to go 3 inches by 3 inches. Okay, so this is going to be what they call the plug, and then we're going to have flaps that go around it. We'll go make that plug right now. I love these little pieces of drywall like this. You can pick them up from any hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's. I got this from Ace Hardware. A full sheet of drywall is pretty cheap. I think it's around like 10 bucks or something. But you can get this for like 8 bucks, 7 bucks, which I know is pretty, it's kind of a rip-off. But it's super convenient for doing patches. You can get a lot of patches out of this one piece. As you can see, I've already kind of cut one piece out. So the plug that we're going to put into the wall is going to be 3 inches by 3 inches square. But we need some paper flaps that go all the way around it. I know it's a little confusing, just follow along. So those paper flaps should be about 1.5 inches on each side. So if we go 3 by 3 plus 1.5 inches plus 1.5 inches, that's going to be 6 inches by 6 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that now. All right, now that I've got my little patch here, we're going to flip it over to the back side, and I'm going to mark 1.5 inches in all directions. Okay, so this should be roughly right here in the middle. Remember, this is the back of the drywall. This should be 3 inches by 3 inches with 1 inch gaps all the way around. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to score with a razor blade. I'm going to cut all my lines. I'll show you what I mean. Like this. I'm going to cut my hand off. Okay, so I've cut all along my lines. Now I'm going to snap the drywall. Now we want this paper on the front. Okay, we want to keep that. So be real careful not to rip that off. So it's all snapped just like that. And then carefully, we're just going to pull the drywall off the paper. Try to keep the paper. Okay, if there's any little funk like that, see these little funky like that? Try to get those off there. You can scrape them off with a drywall knife or something, but that can mess up your patch. There we go. This thing's ready to go. Now another thing an old timer taught me one time is that if you cut these corners off, it makes your patch just a little bit easier to use. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. There we go. I just kind of cut the corners off a little bit, just like that. All right, we're ready to go stick this on the wall. So we've got our blowout patch right here ready to install. Now as you can see, it just kind of goes in the hole like this. That plug goes in the hole like that. So since we're not attaching to the drywall, it doesn't matter if if this is 1/2 inch drywall and I'm using a 5/8 plug, or vice versa, or if this were lathe and plaster, it doesn't matter because I'm not attaching this piece to the back of the wall. I'm attaching to the front. So it's always going to be nice and smooth across the front. Okay, So what we're going to do to prep it, we're going to use a little bit of, I like 20-minute mud. I'm a big fan of 20-minute mud. This stuff it's not pre-mixed, it's a powder, which means you can store it for a really long time, for years. It's really cheap, and it sets up in 20 minutes, which is great. I love it. You can get it at Home Depot, Ace Hardware, wherever. Big fan. So to prep, we're going to go inside the hole here. Oh, the consistency you want, it's like that, right? It's not too dry, it's not too wet. When I turn my knife upside down, it doesn't fall off my knife. That's the right consistency. So we're going to put some mud on the inside of the hole here. Just to make sure we get a good bite, let's go ahead and put a little mud around the outside of our patch too. Just like that, we're ready to go. Push that sucker on there. I'm squeezing all that mud I stuck underneath. I'm squeezing all that mud out. Okay, now I'm going to switch to my 8-inch blade. Switching to my 8-inch blade. So we don't have to make this perfect yet, but I do want to cover the tape and make sure all the ends of the tape are laid down. None of that tape, I don't want any of that tape to be sticking up because it's never going to lay down. If I don't get it to lay down on this pass, on this coat, it's never going to lay down right. Alright, when you got a pretty good coat over the top of your patch, it's time to smooth the edges. To smooth the edges, don't worry about killing this thing yet. We're not trying to get perfect just yet. Really, we're trying to make sure this patch is in place and nice and strong. And we got to cover the paper. So now that I've got a good layer of mud on the wall, I'm going to go around and I'm going to put a lot of pressure on the outside of my knife. That's going to keep it nice and tight and thin it around the edges. Like I said, don't worry about getting perfect, but I do want to get a good cover of the paper. I don't want to have any edges of the paper sticking out. That's it right there. That's going to be a good first coat. We'll come back and finish her up later. So this patch definitely isn't fully dry yet. You can see how it's white here and kind of off-white here, but it's hard. So I'm going to go ahead and start the next coat. So I've switched to my 12-inch knife. And this time we're going to go as smooth as we can, right? We're going to try to get as smooth as we can. Now when I do it, I like to knock off the corners. That kind of helps me a little bit. See, I knocked off the corner here and there. Makes it a little bit easier to make it smooth. We're going to go around the patch with pressure on the outside of the blade. So even though this is skip trowel, I still want the wall to be pretty smooth before I try to put any texture on it. And if you don't think it's smooth enough, you always have the option of dry sanding when you're done. Dry sanding makes it perfect. Nothing makes it as smooth as dry sanding does. I think that's good enough for me to go ahead and put on my final texture coat. So I'm just going to add, I don't really know what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to kind of add some texture to the wall. My wall is really smooth, super smooth, just a little bit of texture. So what I've got on here is way too much. I'm going to smooth that out. And let that dry. Then I'll come back and paint it tomorrow. Before I call it quits, I wanted to give you a close-up of the patch. You can see the wall is really smooth. just a little bit of texture, and my patch is really smooth with just a little bit of texture. So when this dries and it's primed and painted, it's going to be perfect. So as always, I'm Alan. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.